Oh, hello. You up there? I've got a package here from Laser's Edge. Ken Golden has sent me an album over to have a listen to. So what have we got here? Shall we have a look at it? Right. Polymath. High Concept Math Prog. Masterworks. That's Prog magazine there. Very interesting. I love it when Ken sends me stuff. I really do. He knows my tastes. He knows what I like, and he wouldn't send me something without considering what I like. Now, on this video, we're going to be talking about prog metal. I'm going to be trying to deal with prog metal as a concept anyway, but by looking at two albums, an established prog metal classic, the album Crack the Sky by Mastodon, and also this new album here by the artist Polymath, and it's called Something Deeply Hidden. It's on Laser's Edge. It came out in April. I will read out what it says here. For fans of all things progressive, Polymath is an instrumental band from Brighton and London, blending ethio jazz, I think that's ethno jazz, that should be, classic prog, post-rock and math rock. And there they are, they look very fine gentlemen, lots of moustaches and serious looks and black clothing. That's what we expect. Of course, it's wrapped in plastic, so I feel a little bit like Phil Aston over at Now Spinning magazine. You know, he keeps this stuff. Bloody hell, I don't. Right, so very tasteful cover. It looks just like black and white, but it's actually, it's a painting. It's all very black and white in it, prog metal. It's very serious. So let's going to put this on. Now, of course, I will let this play for a matter of seconds, you know. But even though I am here promoting the album, right? If I play it, then I will lose. I could get copyright strike, or I could get stopped in certain areas, or at the least they're going to have all the money for it. And then why would I bother bloody doing this if I'm not getting the ad revenue? And this is the worst thing about today's music climate, right? Because I genuinely want to help this new band out here. Right, let's see what it sounds like. I can't start like that. That was such an awful, incompetent dropping of the needle onto a record that I'm gonna have to do that again. Right, so let's position this up using the old bloody tone arm thing there. Position it in the right place, and then let it go down slowly. It's still a bit messy. It's a Technics turntable, you see. Anyway, shut your mouth. So, firstly, the matter in hand, a review of this album. It's a great album. Yesterday I only thought it was a good album because I'd gone and listened to it on Bandcamp, and I have to be honest, you know, checking it out on vinyl is a completely different experience. This is why we must do this. That probably causes a great problem with a lot of the listening I do here and reviews I do, but I have to say I enjoyed it yesterday, had it on the headphones, listened to it on Bandcamp. Today, putting it on high volume in my studio on vinyl, being able to hear the drums up front all beautiful and warm, and the rich distorted guitar sounds, a completely different experience. This is a great album. This does not succumb to the problems I find with prog metal. On this video, I'm going to be trying to address the problem I have with prog metal. And I'm going to do it through the examination of two albums that I actually really like, because they don't fall into that trap. One will be this album by a new band, and the other one will be a prog metal classic, and one that I really do like, Mastodon's Crack the Sky. Now, there may be some people will be wondering whether this is a prog album or even a prog metal album, but we'll get onto that in a minute. But I'm going to try and examine why I like this, but most prog metal I don't like. But let's get back to Polymath, because I'm here to do a review of this album. Well, I would recommend it. That's what I'm going to say. I recommend this album. Pop over to Laser's Edge, buy a copy of this album, help the band out. If you're into prog and metal and also sort of virtuoso music, and also music which is truly progressive, which is pushing the barrier and going outside the metal genre to other styles of music, but most importantly, sounds like a real band playing, doesn't sound like some sort of computer game where some, you know, privileged rich kids who don't have to get a job can sit there programming a record on Pro Tools, programming in the drum parts, dialing in the guitar parts, and producing something that no human could actually play, so that they can feel like they're very clever and get the plaudits of prog fans who are ignorant to the way that this sort of stuff is made. I don't feel like I'm hearing that. I feel like I'm hearing a real band that's playing in the room. Now, it could well be, especially with them coming from Brighton, that these guys, perhaps, maybe, I don't know, I'm being totally prejudiced here, you know, maybe they went to the Brighton School of Music, which was the one down there. It's not ACM, is it? It's I might be deliberately forgetting what it's called, you know, but never mind. I might not want to, you know, really give much coverage or profile to that music college, but they may well have gone there, you see. I've known quite a lot of prog metalers that have gone down to that college. In the old days, you could get a guitar lesson from Guthrie Govan, I do believe, but I don't believe he's there anymore. But that's the dream, isn't it? Get down to Brighton. You know, you don't need to get a job. You're not that type of a young person. You can afford to live down there. Don't know how. Maybe mommy and daddy will help you. And you can form a band like this, which doesn't have a hope in hell of actually making any money and generating any profit. But I'm trying to do it for them, but also identifying the first problem I have with prog metal. Right? The world doesn't need the amount of prog metal that's out there. It doesn't need it. Okay? But it's out there. And the reason why there's so much of it, you would think it'd be scarce because it's quite hard to play. So you need musicians that can play this stuff. But of course, they don't really play it, or if they did play it, they had about 300 goes at playing it and then cut it out and then banged it into Pro Tools and basically assimilated it into a way where they may as well just gone to AI and say, you know, create me something that sounds very heavy but very complex that will make musicians think I'm great. Because that's the first worry I have with prog metal, that it's being made primarily to make me think, oh, aren't they great? Aren't I impressed by their playing? Isn't it fast? Isn't it hard? Isn't it technical? You know, then it becomes a big dick waving competition, basically. And of course, I never want to get involved in a competition like that, but that's what it can be like. But this doesn't feel like that. Maybe these guys that were doing this a few years ago are into that, but they feel like they have matured and developed other interests in other music, and they're trying to create a piece of art, and that's what I like. And when something's progressive, I want it to sort of blow my mind, a little bit like an acid trip, or maybe, you know, a journey into the depths of the Amazon forest on ayahuasca. I want that type of experience, but in music form. And I got to be honest, the sort of conservatism of a lot of modern prog metal, it doesn't give me that. I don't feel like I'm having my mind blown. Now, I don't know whether I'm having my mind blown fully with this album. You know why? Because they don't fall into the other trap of some prog metal bands, and that's having singing on. Because it doesn't matter what you're playing, it doesn't matter how many time signatures it is, if you've got quite complex riffs, right, and then you put some singing on it, you can either growl over it, or rap, or try and sing in some non-proggy way, which will make it sound like some sort of middle of the road, you know, like Styx or something. So most people will go for the sort of Dream Theater, you know, big cheese vocals of Le Brie, which is actually French for the cheese. And once you got those on, I don't want to listen to it because it all goes down the hair metal route, doesn't it? Now, Dream Theater aren't really that hair metal, really. But once I see that vocal on there, or hear it at least, and for me, I'm sort of laughing up my sleeve a little bit at it. It's a little bit. Now, you can go down that route. You can explore the comedy route of that and expose the absurdity of it. There's a prog metal band called Panzer Ballet, and I love them because there's a sense of humour. There's no sense of humour here. This is very serious. I mean, look at the album artwork. It's abstract and grey. Sorry, got it the wrong way around. So they haven't fallen into that. No vocals, instrumental, lots of philosophical titles. I like this. The universe is an engine. 1, 2, 3, 4, body problem. Right? Oh, such a thing is now. Euthyphro dilemma. That's just side 1. Right, recorded 2026, mixed by Mark Roberts. Shall I read out the guys' names? Polymath R, Joe Branton, Josh Gesner, Tim Walters, Chris Wallison, with additional guitar on track 7 by Ben Harris. So I'm giving them a shout out. This is a great album. If you're into prog metal, go and buy it. It doesn't fall into all the cheesy traps. It doesn't fall into the computer traps. It doesn't fall into the showing off traps. This feels like an album of music, and I like it very much. Now, the guys are probably watching this thinking, well, is this a good review from Andy? Is this a good review? Is he giving us a good review now? I am giving you a good review. This is as good as it gets for me. Unless you're the Mahavishnu Orchestra or from the 1970s or both, you are going to get the acidic side of my tongue. You know, the barbed fun poking. And the reason is, Polymath, is because this is very serious stuff, isn't it? You are very serious young gentlemen, aren't you? And that is the only problem I have with prog metal. I never had this when I listened to Gentle Giant or Genesis or Yes or any of those bands. I felt like they were basically off their heads. They were just like, almost like sort of, they're hippies basically, that saw the world in a magical way. And if we take Yes, probably the greatest progressive rock band of all time, you have the whimsy of John Anderson balanced by the obvious knowing humour of gold cape wearing, curry eating Rick Wakeman. And I like that, you see, but it might be just because I'm an old bloke. It might be this, I just like the stuff I like. And when all this prog metal came in, you know, it came in after my time and I just don't like it because I'm old. Now, that could be the case, except I think there's a case to be made that prog metal has always been there. And it's a stupid name for a genre anyway, but that's what we're going to get to by the end of the video. But park that idea as we move on to another album, a classic album. This one made in, when was it made, this one? 2009 by Mastodon. There we go. Brilliant name for a band, Mastodon. That's like a great big elephant thing, isn't it? It's like a prehistoric elephant that would dwell in the colder regions. Am I right with that? A great big, you know, a great big elephant, big furry elephant, Mastodon. Great artwork. I like that artwork. It looks like pseudo spiritualist sort of weird occult metaphysical thing, and I love that. I love that type of thing. Crack the Sky. They spelt sky S-K-Y-E with the E on. It sounds like, you know, that Robert Eggers who makes Vampire and Witch and all that bit, and he can never spell anything right because he's always spelling it like it's in the olden days. It's all a bit gothic, and this is very gothic. Now, I love this album. Absolutely incredible. Why do I love it? Because it sounds like they're playing real. It's all the stuff I say. It sounds like they're really playing. It doesn't sound like they're just trying to show off and impress me with how good they are. They want to blow my mind. It's all sort of weird. And we can see that it's in the names of the tracks. Much like the other album, we've got tracks called Divinations, Quintessence, The Ghost of Corellia, The Tsar, which is in 4 parts, Usurper, Escape, Martyr, Spiral, and of course it ends with The Last Baron. I love this album. Look at this. We've got some sort of, you know, what is it? Fire-breathing sun god. We've got some astral plane being exhibited, you know, in a number of ways with the moon chakra on the old sexual parts. It's all there. This is what, and the thing is, of course, here we have to pay tribute to the great Brett Hines, lead guitar, vocals, and banjo. Right, a banjo. I like an album with a banjo on. You know, I don't. It reeks of Americana. That's one thing Mastodon aren't, which is another thing. Prog metal isn't Americana, so that's another good thing about it. So, the Mastodon album, what I love about it is the same thing I love about this Polymath album. It comes in, it's got some great riffs, it's heavy, it's exciting, which is what we love about metal. But when we get to the metal sections, especially on the opener, Oblivion, it's absolutely beautiful. It goes beyond the realms of prog metal into realms of beautiful music making, orchestral, classical, jazz, ethereal. Right, now I can put up with someone screaming their head off if we've got that as a balance, okay? The playing's great, the drumming's great, and it all sounds like real human beings playing, because a lot of modern prog metal doesn't sound like that. Now I know there's guys out there that can actually play like that now and sound inhuman, and that is another thing altogether, you know, the idea that you're going to try and represent something that is inhuman on your instrument. I like that. And that seems to point to almost a sort of a free jazz approach where you're pushing the instrument to the extremes, but it then starts to miss out on this idea of groove and feel and the blues. And I think Mastodon have an element of the blues in there, and they understand that aspect. Maybe Polymath don't so much understand the soul and blues, or if they do, it might be an interesting place for them to go next, because whatever they do instrumentally, whatever solo they do, I still feel like they have made sure that no mistake has been made, that no stone has been left unturned in the pursuit of perfection, even though this perfection is a real perfection of a band playing, I admit that. But I would like to hear some sort of abandon. I would like to hear at some point a moment where the band doesn't know what they're doing, that they have gone beyond their perception of what is great into the realm of not knowing. What do you mean by this, Andy? Well, think of Hendrix. Think of that moment in New Year's Eve 1969, looking into a new decade that Jimi Hendrix would never see, as he launches into that machine gun solo. And within that, he takes whatever he was doing, the blues or rock music or whatever it is, he takes that to a place where he doesn't know where he is. It's an incredible thing. That is what is missing, I think, from prog metal. And that would be my advice, would be to try and temper the perfection. It's great to have the perfection, but temper that with what you don't know, to go in the room and just play, to find out who you are as musicians underneath all that. Neither of these albums do this. They all suffer from that, although they are not utilising the computer to create this sort of perfection. Let's back up here on this, and let's go off on an odyssey. We're going to, not on a tangent, because it's prog metal. We're going to go off on an odyssey and see where we end up. Prog metal, as a title, is an amalgamation of two styles, prog and metal. In the same way as jazz rock is an approximation, an amalgamation, of two styles, jazz and rock. Now the problem is with rock music is a direct extension out of jazz. So what you have is you have jazz, and then jazz begats rhythm and blues. It mixes with country music, you get rock and roll. But the reason why rock emerges in the 60s is because jazz musicians start to see a way of playing their jazz, in London this is, through the genre of this new rhythm and blues rock music that's out there. And so jazz rock is embedded at the beginning of rock. And so when we look at a band like Cream, or we look in the States at a band like Grateful Dead, and we look at any of the beginnings of jazz rock, what we see are musicians that are actually creating rock music, right? So jazz rock emerges around about 1965. That's when rock music's emerging. So you cannot take the rock out of jazz or the jazz out of rock. It's always been there, and it always will be there. Rock music is an extension of jazz, and jazz holds its hand with the blues, and blues, when you extend it, becomes rock music, right? That's why the blues stopped being a form of music that innovated in the 1960s when rock music came along. And there's an argument jazz did the same thing, because the child of jazz and blues was rock music. And jazz's ability to assimilate other music forms, right, happens straight off. And prog is the direct twin of rock music. Punk, drum and bass, reggae, whatever you want to call that, right, that comes out of rock music. But prog happens as soon as we are creating rock music, we've got prog. You can go back to Frank Zappa, Mothers of Invention, or even the Beatles, Sgt. Pepper Revolver. You can go back to Pink Floyd, Piper at the Gates of Dawn, or even The Doors, right? Love, whatever the bands you want to pick on, prog and rock music are holding hands. So when we look at the birth of heavy rock, which then becomes heavy metal, which is 1970, Led Zeppelin, Black Sabbath, Uriah Heep and Deep Purple, I would put it there in the UK with those 4 albums. All 4 of those albums are actually landmarks in progressive rock. So who invents heavy metal? Black Sabbath. But they are prog metal from day one. And it's not until punk comes along that heavy metal isn't seen as holding hands with progressive rock. We can go and point at ELP tracks, Yes tracks, Gentle Giant tracks, King Crimson tracks, which are verging on heavy metal. It's always within the grasp of prog to become heavy metal, and it's always within the realms of heavy metal to become prog. Bands like UFO, Judas Priest, Scorpions are all holding their hands with prog. But it starts to get refined beyond that, doesn't it? By 72, 73, we have Queen coming out and actually creating a commercial approach to progressive rock and heavy rock, but also amalgamating the prog even more. Then we get Rush, 74, 75, don't we? Then we get Rainbow. I've been listening to Kansas, and a lot of the American prog bands, when you actually examine what's going on with Styx and Kansas and that line through, takes a sort of commercial sheen that you get with American pop music, but also Kansas are a lot heavier in a way. They're a lot more chirpier and brighter than the British progressive rock bands, but they're actually heavier. So when you listen to like Carry On My Wayward Son, we get an almost Crosby, Stills and Nash vocal, don't we? Put through the Eagles, and then we get that. That's prog metal. It's all prog metal, right? Heavy metal, as it was known in the 70s, not what we class as heavy metal now, was shamed a little bit, wasn't it? It was shamed a little bit in the 1970s, wasn't it? Because punk came out. And punks were playing faster and more aggressive. It was more visceral. It was more of what you associated with heavy metal. And I think that gave a kick up the arse of very many heavy metal bands. It allowed something like AC/DC to come through. Much more visceral rock and roll. Lemmy Kilminster, who had been a resident in one of the most sort of out there hippie prog bands of all time, Hawkwind, was able to realise his rock and roll roots and form Motorhead. But Motorhead, for all their sort of visceral, guttural, thrashy approach to music, also weren't afraid to do songs about the Second World War or to go towards imagery like, say, the album Iron Fist, which you could see as being proggy. But of course, with the advent of new wave of British heavy metal, these people that were steeped in punk and coming out of that aesthetic, heavier, faster, the likes of Angel Witch and Venom, all had this sort of mystique and mystery that they'd taken from prog. Right? The epic, the idea that you're going to sing about witches and demons and all that type of thing. Bands like Diamond Head and Iron Maiden basically took prog at a point where the world was going, prog's had it now, we don't want to know any about prog, it's all pretentious rubbish, and punk's come along and wiped it out the way, and nobody's interested anymore. I know Pink Floyd are selling way more than any punk band, but we'll ignore that. But what they really ignored was the fact that bands like Iron Maiden were going to come in, take the music world over, and then sit there for nearly 50 years at the top of this with their own bloody aeroplane doing £1 million tours in which they did everything that was proggy. Long tracks, epic tracks, conceptual stuff, but also a stage show that had all sorts of lighted effects and monsters walking around and all that. And a focus on the virtuosity of the band. I think Iron Maiden and then Metallica and all of these bands, none of them ever were playing prog metal. So what do we mean by prog metal? Where does it come from? Well, I think what happened was it's an amalgamation of thrash metal, which had come out of the new wave of British heavy metal, but also that guitar thing that had emerged. Now, you could call that neoclassical metal, but that line started by Ritchie Blackmore. Now, if you want to go back to the big four at the start, Uriah Heep, Black Sabbath, Led Zeppelin, Deep Purple, what Ritchie Blackmore provides is the blueprint for neoclassical rock. Rush were never neoclassical, Rainbow were. And that starts to come through. We get Uli John Roth in the Scorpions. Then we get Randy Rhoads on the Blizzard of Oz album. Now, I went back to that album the other day. The reason is because when I've been listening to albums that people think are masterpieces, like Harvest by Neil Young, and I've been listening to Transformer, I had Transformer on the other day, and it's great, and I'm trying to say why I like it and trying to be open-minded about it, and I'm doing all that, but my enjoyment of it is very intellectual. And then, as I'm writing my notes on Transformer, what should come on but I Don't Know by Ozzy Osbourne, and then straight away I think it's amazing. And the lyrics, Ozzy's lyrics, are as profound, if not more profound, than Lou Reed's lyrics for me. They're truthful, they're honest. So I put the album on again and I listened to it and I thought, oh my God, Randy Rhoads, we've all forgotten what he brought to guitar playing and the genius that is going on here. And he's almost like the opposite side, the opposite jigsaw piece of the puzzle to Eddie Van Halen. Right, he's coming in, he's doing these neoclassical bits, he's doing these acoustic guitar parts, but he's also using a lot of strange effects within his soloing, you know, strange chromatic runs, all sorts of things that are going to set up guitars like Yngwie Malmsteen, and then that whole, you know, raft of guitar players. And I'm looking at this and I'm thinking, this is very interesting because we've got Ozzy Osbourne from Black Sabbath, and he's trying to strike out from Black Sabbath. He's trying to create something. He's in competition with Black Sabbath. The crime of this is that, and I may do a video on this, but Sharon Osbourne's decided to try and erase, you know, she won't erase Randy Rhoads because Randy Rhoads died. But, you know, Lee Kerslake and Bob Daisley, they wrote the songs. They didn't just play brilliantly. Bob Daisley wrote the songs. Lee Kerslake was involved in the songs. And Don Airey. You know, when we listen to Mr. Crowley, when you hear that out-and-out prog intro to Mr. Crowley, that's Don Airey. He wrote that, mates with Ozzy, so I said, oh, you can have the bloody money for that. I don't want it. But the truth is, Don Airey, where had he been? He'd been in bloody Colosseum, right? He'd played in Rainbow, right? In an earlier incarnation of Rainbow, you had Bob Daisley. So you've got that Deep Purple influence coming through, right? You've got the Black Sabbath thing coming through, and with Lee Kerslake you've got that Uriah Heep thing coming through. His drumming is so exciting and real, and I think some of the modern prog metalers need to go back and listen to Blizzard of Oz by Ozzy Osbourne and listen to that, because you put the headphones on, it's guitar, bass and drums most of the time, and they are just playing it. Listen to Bob Daly's bass parts, they're not worked out. Right, he's all over the bloody place. Lee Kerslake is all over the bloody place. So for me, 1980, that album, more than anything else, and it influenced us so much. And the next thing you had, you know, Rising Force by Yngwie Malmsteen, then Vinnie Moore, then you got Racer X, then we got Cacophony, we got the thrash metal bands, and some of those guitarists start to actually come through. Martin Friedman comes through, doesn't he, to Megadeth. And a certain idea of thrash metal, but with virtuosity put in there, that idea starts to emerge very quickly, you know. And I think Dream Theater are the band that really nail that. But on the other side, we have a band like Voivod opening up a much more chaotic, alternative approach. And that has gone underneath prog metal. I'm thinking of bands like Living Colour, King's X, Primus, Mr. Bungle, Cardiacs and the bands, Faith No More, those type of bands. Is that prog metal? For me, one of the greatest prog metal albums is probably the first Mr. Bungle album. So there's an aspect of this which is quite absurdist as well, and it's quite avant-garde, that exists underneath prog metal, informed by some of the extreme bands that exist at that time, like things like Napalm Death. And then on the other side, you have like John Zorn, Naked City, The Ruins. And we were all listening to all of this. At the same time, you've got like Bill Laswell, and he's doing albums like Last Exit, which are like free jazz metal albums. This underneath was the promise of prog metal that I found exciting. Over the top of it, Dream Theater begat what I would call the big dick competition, where people start to listen to the virtuosity for virtuosity's sake. Now, that's also fed by jazz rock fusion. My point is here, is when you look back, prog metal has gone along like this, in and around and being fed by all the styles of music that we love here, and could well be an amalgamation of the best of all the stuff we talk about here, but in a way the worst. Now, what undoes prog metal for me is in the 2000s is the advent of computers. Now with computers, you can chop the drums up, you can re-trigger the drums, you can even reprogram the drums. And I was directly involved in this in the band Frost that I played in. I also played in the prog band IQ. And at a certain point in time, I got involved in a band probably 10, 12 years ago called Brave New Sky, which was a collaboration between me and my old mate Dick Burke from the old Frost days. And we got involved with a number of Norwegian musicians, Swedish musicians around bands like, there's, you've sort of got that Pain of Salvation, Leprous type of thing going on. And when we started to make the album, it became a battle between me wanting to have my real drums on it and the rest of them wanting the drums to sound programmed, basically, to take the drums. Now, eventually, I left in a huff, and the album came out. It wasn't called Brave New Sky, it was called Audio Plastic. It came out, it was released. The drums on that was entirely programmed. And for me, the life had been completely taken out of that music. If the music was difficult, it was complex. I really had to work to nail some of the drum parts. Lots of double bass drum, probably the heaviest thing I've ever done. And I wanted to show that I could really play it, and to have this idea that it was that you could have a normal drum sound, a normal drummer with all the little idiosyncrasies could play this stuff. Now I'm going to play you a little excerpt from Brave New Sky before it folded, of me in the studio play one of the more difficult passages, one of the sort of difficult double bass drum passages. Now this has been, there's a little bit of EQing and gating in the drum sound. It's been pushed a little bit, but I got directly involved with this in terms of me wanting to retain reality and have some humanity in there, and the idea that we're only here to, embody the platonic grid of perfection, which none of us are. Anyway, have a watch of this. So that's the closest thing I ever got to, except for my own music, of course, getting into that sort of double bass drum, technical prog metal approach. And so my experience as a listener, my experience as a sort of person interested in creative music and not wanting to get bogged down into the sort of more teenage, big dick competition. That's the only way I could describe it. This is so fast, this is so technical, and this gets so exacerbated now that we have these sort of computer motivated bands like Polyphia, where you have a guitarist like Tim Henson who embodies perfection in absolutely every way, and he sits there just jumping through hoops, both visually and audio wise, in terms of what he's playing, and none of it sounds real. I'm convinced it's not sounding real. I'm not saying he can't play it, but the computer's taken it and made it into something that sounds plastic. But he himself has taken all the money that they've made from their huge success, obviously spent it on plastic surgery, so he himself can embody this sort of platonic guitar hero perfection, neither male or female, like a perfect doll, skin perfect, everything angular, and sit under this bloody... I watched a video and I did a reaction to it last year where he was sat in the Garden of Eden under the apple tree. That it's all so pretentious. And as much as there might be the semblance of interest musically in this stuff for those of us who like to listen to interesting things, interesting grooves and interesting riffs, for me that is wiped out by the absolute, perfectionism of the production that wipes the humanity away. But also it's trading in a whole bunch of ideas which are not creative and they're not artistic. It is only there to impress 15-year-old boys, right? And that aspect's always been there. That aspect of the teenager who wants to look up to someone a few years older than them in an almost sort of proto-homoerotic way. Confused as they are, should they respect them for their ability, or should they, in their confused way, just look at how beautiful they are? This was lampooned by Frank Zappa in Punky's Whips. And this aspect has been really exacerbated in the realm of prog metal. When I was at college, I used to interview kids that would come in with all the face piercings and tattoos, the neck all black, real handsome guys with makeup on and swoopy hair and real expensive tattoos. God knows how they afforded it when they were only like 18 or 19. And I can remember one guy, I said to him, this music you're making, it's just, you've just done it on a computer, it's not real. And he said to me, it does not matter. He says, I'm good looking, so we will do all right. We will get a deal. This aspect has hung over prog metal. Now, I think about 10, 15 years ago, there was in the actual realm of heavy metal, which I'm not a part, I'm too old and I'm not involved in it. But knowing some of the guys that are in it, there seemed to be, again, a turn around against this. And I started back then to listen to Radio 1's Heavy Rock show, and there was a lot of stuff that was very visceral and very real. And coming back to these two, I think this here is a great example of modern prog, math rock metal, whatever you want to call it, that does have a heart, that is played. The only thing I think that is maybe, if this is an 8 out of 10 album, 7, 8 out of 10, it's well worth going checking out. That is my review of it. If you're into this music, this is like an essential purchase, I would say. It won't let you down. This is great. And all those that have been blown away by the more weirder aspects of progressive metal with Angie de Poitrine, and I love them, and they are great, except I think there's so many bands musically doing what they're doing, but the absurdity they haven't been able to utilise. But this polymath band is as great as them. If you're into that, if you're into that stuff and you enjoy the musicality of it, then go and check out this band. But my advice to them would be to explore the uncomfortable areas of who they are. Get into music that is not just a showcase of how perfect and what great players they are, that actually exhibit something of the confusion of what it is to be human. And the best way to do that is through not making comedy music, but having some semblance of humour, which I think Angie to Patrine have done absolutely brilliantly. But that is my review of this album. And also, you know, I'm honoured that Ken Golden at Laser's Edge sends me this stuff and I don't have to pay for it. It's wonderful. He sent me this through the post and I've been enjoying it in the car. Well, I said I enjoyed it yesterday in the car listening to it off Bandcamp, and I've sat here today. It's a great album. I cannot come on here and play the game of just saying it's a great album, absolutely love it, go and buy. I have to offer some sort of intelligent critique because I feel that's my job. Now let's go to this one here. This is a classic album. Now, you might be saying, well, what other albums do you like, Andy? Pale Communion by Opeth. That's a great album where, rather than going towards that screamo perfection programmed approach, Opeth decided to explore their prog roots in a quite conservative way. And in doing that, I felt that they said, well, the drums need to be more flowing and free. And suddenly you heard what a great drummer sounds like playing and flying in a band that's a great bunch of players. Now, that Opeth album I was obsessed with when I was playing back in this Brave New Sky that became Audioplastic with, you know, this prog metal project that I've just shown you. And I kept saying, this is the future, this is the future. Well, is it the future? I don't know. But I think we've had full-on metal bands like Avenged Sevenfold move towards progressive rock, and I feel their Life Is But a Dream album that came out a couple of years ago is a masterpiece. It's probably my favourite, if you want to call it progressive metal, but it's much more closer to what Frank Zappa was doing, and I feel that they know how to riff, they know how, and then there's certain points on that album where they do utilise that sort of triggered, you know, ultra, you know, tempo mapped, quantised, auto-tuned thing, but they do it knowingly, and then they balance it with things where they don't do that, and that's absolutely fantastic. That album almost deals in music form with what I'm trying to grasp here. This album, I feel, is much more just a heavy rock band in the tradition of Sabbath and Rainbow and Iron Maiden and Slayer, that are just making great rock music and not trying to blow me away with how technical they are, but trying to blow me away by creating something which has the majesty and wonder of something like Rainbow Rising. I think that's the aesthetics that's there. The reason why I like this album so much, Crack the Sky, is this, in the musical moments that they provide, as well as being clever, complex, interesting, unexpected, which is what you want from prog, they also know how to write music which is beautiful and which is worth doing. A musician, when they sit down to play, when they sit down to compose, when they sit down to improvise, tries to do something that's at least interesting musically. They try and find something that's compelling. Now, music's not great because it's clever or complex. Music is great because the artist went, oh, this is giving me a feeling that is powerful and unique. That the combination of rhythms and notes here that I just put together speaks to me in a way which another set of notes wouldn't. I don't know if you've noticed this with AI. AI never really hits you that hard because what it doesn't do is amalgamate all these random elements together and then go, oh, I love that. It is not the individual going, oh, I love that. It is the collective going, this is the sort of thing that people like, right? And that's two separate things. If you wish to play prog metal, more than anything else, I think what the genre needs is someone going, is this riff worth playing? Is this riff cool? Or is it just clever and hard? Are these harmonies like emotive, or are they just complex? You know, it can't just be good on paper. It has to be good in reality. So I will keep coming back to prog metal because in a world where we think prog's been maligned and we tried to champion it, and there's people getting in touch and saying, "Oh, we've put this prog at the proms together and now we've got prog on the BBC, blah, blah, blah." What we forget is the biggest bands in the world now that continue going, that can, whether it's Metallica, whether it's Dream Theater, there are so many rock bands around who sell in the hundreds, thousands, if not millions, can still draw great crowds. I mean, look at Rush. Look at Rush at the moment. This is the biggest tour in the world at the moment. This is all that counts for serious music fans, right? And I could come on here and talk about Rush forever and ever. I could do a Rush video every day. I don't know how long for, but you guys are going to watch every one and they're all going to do 20,000, 30,000 views, and they're going to keep my channel going. I had to stop doing it because I'm compelled by them. Why am I compelled by them? It's more than the fact that they're just clever, that the stuff's hard to play, right? And for all my critique of Neil Peart, say, well, look at Annika, she's coming and she's just walking all over Neil, which is the true. Most modern, professional drummers, whether they be prog metal or jazz fusion or whatever they are, the technical ability has gone through the roof. In 1980, Neil Peart was leading the way technically for drummers, especially in the realm of rock, but not now. But the reason I did that was for people to drop thinking that Rush are the greatest band in the world because they're the best players in the world, right? It's not that. It's because the music they wrote is amazing, or at least it was up until Signals. And then for some reason they kept doing what they did, but it wasn't compelling anymore for me, right? What makes Rush so great? I'll tell you something. To be able to exist for that long, to be able to have the ability to come back after sort of 10 years, sell all your gigs out, right, and then go out and do a show which is different every night, right, and for these guys that are in their mid-70s now to be able to pull that off, that is the virtuosity of Rush, right? They are never going to be able to play like Animals as leaders. But who do we want really? Animals as leaders or Rush? And in 50 years' time, for all the virtuosity those guys possess, and Matt Garsker, their drummer, is probably the greatest drummer on the planet at the moment, if only they would let him play on the records and not keep bloody over-quantizing and triggering all his drums until his drums disappear into the platonic world of perfection and I cannot hear Matt Garsker anymore, right? And that's the problem I've got. But even with that, in 50 years' time, are we still going to find that music compelling when music's moved on and is doing something else entirely? This just brings us to the logical outcome of all this prog metal perfectionism in terms of rock music, and that's AI. We have reaped what we have sowed. Or we've sowed what we have reaped. I'm not too sure which one it is. But we've done one of those. And now we've got this thing now. Yesterday, I got a call from the BBC and I had to talk about AI, which I did for about 3 or 4 minutes. But a conversation opened up there that I found quite interesting. And what I find interesting with AI is the vastness of it. We can moan about it, because people are going out thinking they're musicians. And in fact, they're just putting a few prompts in and amalgamating some sort of Frankenstein out of bits of music because that's what AI is, but they don't know because they think they came up with the idea. They haven't got a clue what music is. Someone emailed me the other day and says, I'm an AI musician. I felt like, no, you're not, mate. You're not anything. AI music's not music as far as I'm concerned. But does the world think that? No. In the same way as the world is impressed by all this prog metal. No. I can get worried about that. And then suddenly I'm worried about whether they will actually take over anyway, and we ain't going to end up as either their pets or their fodder or a bit of both. I want to end up as a pet. My cat has it easy, to be honest. So I think in the future, if I could just sort of book that place there, although I'll be long gone by then, nobody's going to want an old pet, are they? Nah, I'll be fodder. We'll all be fodder, won't we? That's the truth. Yeah, we've come to the end of the video. Oh, right. Thanks for watching. I'll see you on the next one.